views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Justice Forums, and most of all, happy Thanksgiving. I'm Daren, Jaime, and we are on the Social Justice Forums. And people ask the question, what are the Social Justice Forums? Well, it's a show that talks about many of the inequities that people face. We actually provide multiple points of view, and then we promote like civic awareness and discussion, and we invite you to be connected to some very special guests. So we want you to stay with us, because guess what? The Social Justice Forums is beginning right now. Welcome back. The Local Initiative Support Corporation, better known as LISC, NYC, supports local organizations advancing equitable development of historically underinvested neighborhoods. Now, as the city's affordable housing project pipeline grows and more market opportunities arise, LISC NYC is launching an initiative to expand the capacity of minority-owned business enterprises as well as developers and helping them to compete for more market share within the industry. And joining us now to share more is the executive director of LISC NYC, Valerie White. And Valerie, glad to have you.
Thank you, Daren. Glad to be back on BronxNet.
Yeah, and so for us, as we talk about this here, I mean, we look around and we do see a lot of growth in terms of housing and this whole marketing environment. I know that your organization is going front and center at really providing some much needed resources.
Yes, absolutely. What we've seen historically in the development of New York City, the rebuilding of communities or even the building of new communities, is that developers of color, in particular Black developers, are not having access to those opportunities to build the communities or do rehabilitation in the communities that look like them, right? Where the population looks like them. So there's something about the cultural integrity of having developers of color working, building communities, community infrastructure, affordable housing in those neighborhoods. So what we're doing is working to establish and partner with opportunities through training, access to capital, and partnership with government agencies are being made to this cadre of developers.
So there is a training program that's actually on site for developers to be able to get this?
Yes, absolutely. So the LISC New York City's Developers of Color program was launched a week ago. We have a cohort of 12 developers. These are mid-level developers of color who have done a few projects, developed maybe a couple of hundred units, but based on our survey and analysis of the market, could utilize some capacity building and some specific skills that will make them more competitive for government contracts, particularly, but also other, nonprofit or private contract opportunities. So we've very carefully curated a curriculum which was developed and designed by Columbia University to provide these developers with those skill sets. We'll be matching that with our credit enhancement fund, which will also give access to capital to these developers who will be going through this 2.5-month program, and then, matching them with opportunities in the end for development projects within the various communities across New York.
Can you give me a little bit more in regards to understanding what's going on in that area of development? Because we do know that when we see development going on across New York City, minorities are not well represented at all. And just that word, minority, and we can really put just a small m right there because we don't see it out there. And there are some challenges to those who really are trying to get into this, into the environment of having contracts across. So what are some of the areas where, the minorities are falling short in terms of being ready for these contracts when they become available?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily start with the minorities falling short, because that's kind of for lack of a better word, the reasoning that the majority population has given for not having, an equitable share of minorities in these contracting opportunities. of course, we're looking at inequities that are systemic. And so we want to be sure that we're identifying these barriers, removing them so that the opportunities are equitable. So some of it has to do, yes, it may have to do with capacity, but capacity comes from experience and opportunity. So it's almost cyclical. If there's not an opportunity to perform on a project, you don't build that capacity to take on, in particular, the larger jobs. And it's the larger jobs that bring that sustainable wealth generation and help those development companies grow. So we wanted to be sure that we identified that by pre-surveying the government agencies that provide contracts, as well as private institutions, private corporations, financial institutions, then taking that information to curate this very specially customized curriculum to address those gaps. But all that is fine. You could train all you want, but if there's not the capital there available for developers to be able to utilize that capital to perform on jobs, then it's, training without the other part of the opportunity. And that's the part where we don't necessarily say that they're falling short, but we're looking to ensure that they have equal access to capital, working capital, in order for their company to be able to perform on deliverables. So we work very closely to put those two things together.
Well, Valerie, thank you for the clarification there, and that's definitely, worth noting. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this because when we talk about contracts, we hear in the clause MWBE utilization. That means minority, women, business. They have the opportunity to experience equity in terms of contracts, but that's not always the case either. But for somebody who may not be so familiar with MWBE utilization, can you first give our viewers a little bit of an education as to what that means?
Yes, well, under New York State law and also New York City law, there it's Article 15A, New York State Executive Law, Article 15A in the state. There is a goal for state government contracts to look to identify 30% of minority and women businesses to participate in the procurement opportunities in New York State. And they need to be certified. So there's an actual division in New York State that goes through and certifies MWBEs. And that's for any state contracting. So it's anything from, developers building bridges and homes to actually purchasing paper clips, right? The state and the city spend a great deal of money on procurement to operate and meet their mission as municipal entities. So the 30% basically is the result of a complex disparity study looking at the available minority companies, matching that with the amount of procurement that each entity spends on a variety of state contracts, and then determining that 30% generally meets it. So that's the goal. Of course, it's a constitutional program, so there's always constitutional challenges, but that's what the goal is. We submit at LISC New York City that there needs to be preparation and more integration to ensure that goal is actually met, not just through sub-consultants, which is often the case on a larger contract, but actually building up the minority companies so that they can be the prime contractor themselves and not have to rely on tacking on to someone else's contract going forward. So that's the type of programming that we are instituting and the partnerships that we are involved in at LISC.
Yeah, so you got this partnership with the New York State Dormitory Authority, and I know you're doing some work there, so more on that.
Yes, and that's the precise type of public-private partnership that would help push forward the, utilizing the goal to grow strength and wealth within developers of color or contractors. So this is a $10 million liquidity agreement with LISC through its Black Economic Development Fund in the strategic investments area of LISC National, with the dormitory DASNY, Dormitory Authority of the State of New York. And basically, DASNY will be contracting with certified MWBEs to be prime contractors on some of the larger construction deals that they are pursuing. And as we know, DASNY, they don't only produce or build dorms, but it's also hospitals and affordable housing and other community infrastructure. So these contractors will have the opportunity to have access to liquidity or working capital so that they can actually complete the deliverables under the contract. Of course, we know that when you are a state contractor, before you get paid, you have to finish the job. So how can you do that if you're waiting to get paid? So this allows these contractors access to working capital, and they will utilize that working capital to complete portions of the job. And then when they get paid back on the invoice from DASNY, they will use a portion of that money to repay back the liquidity agreement. We are also, through this partnership, public-private, working with the Jaime Group, which is a Black-owned surety and insurance broker. And this group will be ensuring that the contractors get the appropriate surety bond so that they can qualify for the DASNY job. But the Jaime Group will actually act as the escrow, ensuring that all the money gets spent appropriately and the liquidity agreement gets paid back. So it's a wonderful partnership between the three, but it does give the opportunity for minority contractors to be in a position to be prime contractors, and that will grow their wealth, and it'll become a point that they won't even need access to a liquidity agreement to perform on state contracts.
Do you have an idea about the number of minority contractors that we see across New York City?
There are, I can't give an exact number, but there are more than sufficient to meet that 30% goal of emerging developers, as well-established minority developers who it's not necessary for them to go through a capacity workshop like we're having at LISC. That's for the smaller developers who haven't had the opportunity to perform on larger contracts. But there are larger developers of color that, again, still have the same hurdles of access to capital, just simply because of the systemic inequities in terms of capital provision to companies of color.
Yeah, you led into my next question. I want to talk about capital for a moment because we are knowing that, right now, all across America, we've got a supply shortage. And when it comes to the fact of capital, a lot of businesses are really struggling and trying to make it. And when you're a developer and when you're a minority business, access to capital is huge. And we heard about the disparities with the, with PPP loans and things such of that nature. Can you give us a little insight as to some of the challenges that people are facing, given the fact of access to capital, and even when the capital is available through PPP, a lot of businesses still got left behind.
Well, through PPP, yes, a lot of businesses did get left behind. Some businesses benefited from it. But I think the biggest thing with that in terms of the PPP, and this happens in general, is that there isn't always an organizational infrastructure to go through the complex application process. And that was a big issue in PPP, particularly for the smaller minority-owned businesses. But going forward, as we think about the access to capital, as we think about how developers of color can be more of a player in the development and the building of communities, we have to look at, are they having the same access to financial institutions? Are the interest rates the same? Are they being asked to look at different variables that a non-minority developer doesn't have to? And I think that in particular with minority developers, they're beginning to have a little bit more success with the community development financial institutions, or the CDFIs, which LISC is one, where we can think about investing in developers who are Black-owned, minority-owned, Latinx-owned, immigrant-owned, and in a different way than a commercial bank has historically done so. So it's our hope to continue to raise that capital, invest in these type of organizations, and start to build that systemic wealth generation so that they're in a position to compete on a regular basis.
Yeah, we see a lot of development going across New York City. We see a lot of construction going on across New York City, and people could always talk about that while this is going on, it's an opportunity that's out there. Are you optimistic that given all of this development and construction that we see across the city and also the state, that we'll see more and more minority participation?
I am optimistic on a number of fronts. First, as we start to continue to call attention to the disparities in the provision of capital to minority developers, I think it will give the opportunity for more investment in these type companies. But when you think about it, Daren, as an ecosystem, investing in minority developers means investing in a larger ecosystem. Then you invest in other aspects of the real estate industry, whether it's lawyers, appraisers, whether it's construction firms, contractors, who then in turn generally will employ minorities to actually complete the work. So you have all these other ancillary businesses that come with development that will give an opportunity to grow workforce development, grow career opportunities for people of color in this particular space. So that in terms of advancing a real estate, inclusive real estate industry that takes into account all of those elements, that is what we are standing our platform on at LISC and pushing forward that concept. We have a concept paper out there. We are raising funds to support that initiative. We have 10 organizations, public, private, government, supporting this concept, and we'll be working to integrate that together as we move forward. So yes, I'm hopeful, but we have to keep the message out. And so that's why it's so important to have the opportunity to speak on mediums such as BronxNet. So we thank you for that.
Hey, we love having you, Valerie. We got to get ready to go. But before we do, how can people get in touch to find out more about the work that LISC is doing and how somebody might be able to get connected?
Yes, absolutely. Our website is www.lisc.org/NYC. On our website, there is a listing of all of the programs that we're doing, our commentary, our op-eds, our news media interviews, but also a way to get in contact with us if you are interested in our platform and would like to partner.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Valerie White, for being with us. And again, happy Thanksgiving to you and glad to have you with us.
Thank you. You as well. Enjoy.
All righty. I want you to stay with us as we continue on this Thanksgiving. We've got more show coming up. And guess what? There's more on the social justice forums. We'll be back with another very special guest in a moment. welcome back. In recent news, the New York Urban League launched its new Diversity and Inclusion Lab, now the Lab Incubator for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiatives, Recruitment, and Best Workplace Practices. Now, the Diversity and Inclusion Lab seeks to empower leaders to inventory their own skills in order to craft a workplace that makes it successful and possible for all. Now, joining us to share more details and discuss this is the president and CEO of the New York Urban League, Ms. Arva Rice, and we're glad to have you back, Arva.
Hello there. How are you? It's wonderful to be back. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. And yeah, congratulations. You've got this Diversity and Inclusion Lab, and we're just excited to hear more about it. So for those who don't know about it, share with us exactly more about what was behind the Diversity and Inclusion Lab.
Well, as you all know, over a year ago, we were all witnesses as George Floyd was murdered. And at that time, COVID was happening. And so all of us were able to look in the camera and see what had happened. And as you know, it ignited a firestorm around the country and around the world, saying that systematic racism does exist, something that we all knew, but it was a worldwide and a countrywide admission that systematic racism did exist. And so what did we need to do in our court system? What do we need to do in our educational system? What do we need to do in our workplaces in order to combat that? And so in the workplace, a lot of corporations decided we're going to issue statements decrying racism. Racism is bad, we're going to fight against it. Well, we applauded that. We think that's a really terrific thing to do. But once you decry that racism is terrible, then what do you do then? What happens after you issue the press release? What happens after you make the public statement? How are you going to be held both accountable, and also how are you going to be assisted in order to make sure that you can do the things within your own systems to fight and eradicate racism? And so for us, working directly with corporations as we do at the New York Urban League, we said we wanted to hold them both accountable and also provide them with a platform so that they could support leaders of color and promote leaders of color within their corporations. And so that's why we created the Diversity and Inclusion Lab.
So how receptive have people been when you talk about holding people accountable and really bringing them to the table and saying, listen, we want to see this, we need to see this, we know this exists, and we need to make it better? How receptive are people?
People have been amazingly receptive. I think that people having to be at home and look on Zoom calls, looked at the squares that were on their computer screens and realized, wait a minute, when I have a management team meeting, these squares are still white and they're still mostly male, right? And so what is it that I could and should be doing in order to change that? And so we put out a call and said we wanted to have an inaugural listing of 10 corporations who would join us in becoming members of the Diversity and Inclusion Lab. And we were able to fill those spots fairly quickly. And they're individuals who are in different ranges when it comes to their commitment to diversity and inclusion. They're all committed, but their programs, some are stellar and they've been doing supplier diversity programming for years. They have affinity groups within their corporations that talk about diversity and inclusion issues. Then there's others that it's really new for them. And so the Diversity and Inclusion Lab is about bringing them together so that they can learn from each other, as well as the expertise that the Urban League will bring to the table.
Yeah, and I know you've also got HBCUs as a part of this whole whole initiative. Talk to us about the incorporation of how HBCUs will be playing part in this.
Yes, when we talk about incorporating incredible Black talent and Black excellence, I don't think anyone should say that sentence without giving ode to engaging, working with our incredible HBCUs, our historically Black colleges and universities. Howard and Hampton and Morgan State and Spelman and Morehouse have just produced just an incredible array of our doctors, teachers, lawyers, and other professionals that contribute to our contribute to our communities. And so corporations need to have direct links to those schools, and we help to provide that sort of bridge for them. Just last weekend, I'm probably still a little bit hoarse, we had our historically Black college and university fair. This year was a little bit different. It was the COVID edition. And so as a result, we were all there with our mask on. Everybody was required to be vaccinated. And some of the schools recruiters were not able to come because of the rules that they have on their college campuses, but their alumni associations stepped right up and said, no, we're going to represent, even if you can't fly somebody in from Louisiana, we're going to make sure that we're living in Brooklyn. I graduated from Xavier, and I'm going to represent the school. And so we had all those schools represented this weekend for young people to find out how to go to school there. So that connection to the HBCUs and making sure that those individuals know about the Diversity and Inclusion Lab is something that's core to the work of our effort.
Yeah, exposure makes the difference. I think that when you get people exposed to various opportunities and engagements, the opportunity to just take part in something can be so life-changing. What have you found when it comes to the area of exposure? Because this is some of the critical work that you guys do.
Exposure is so important. When we talk to the Urban League has launched a number of different science, technology, engineering, and math initiatives. And so when we speak to young people who become engineers, young people that actually go into medicine and become doctors, you ask them, how did that happen? It's because they actually interacted with a doctor who looked like them. It was because they interacted with a technology person who looked like them, an engineer who looked like them. And so being able to see and have those careers reflected is pivotal. It's important for people to understand and be able to see themselves. As long as we're only interacting with doctors who are, in a white lab coat and are white, we think that we can't be that. As long as we see entrepreneurs that don't look like us, we think that we can't aspire to it. And so that's what the Urban League is about: is bridging, making that bridge, and providing equality and access for all New Yorkers.
And take me back to leaders for a minute, because that's also important, right? To have somebody who looks like them, sounds like them, but also to be able to see them at that high level. And when we look at corporate America, we know that it's predominantly white. We know that it's white men that dominate the culture. But give us a little bit about those who are participating in the lab and the experience that they're having when you talk about relevance, because obviously them having this exposure to a lab, and then also having exposure at the corporate level really makes a difference as well.
Absolutely. The members of our lab are as diverse as the New York Yankees and Avalon Bay, National Grid, as well as JP Morgan Chase. And so it's an interesting combination of really terrific companies that come together. As I mentioned, some of them have terrific diversity practices that they've been implementing for decades, and for others, it's relatively new to them. And so I was recently at the management team meeting of one of our partners, and they were talking about community engagement, and I applaud them for being part of the work. But I was a little bit challenged, because looking at their management team, it still is predominantly white, and it still is predominantly male. And so the fact that they have identified and partnered with the New York Urban League, they've identified this as an issue, but there is work to be done. And so that's why we're excited about doing this project. One of the things that I've said to every member of the partnership is that we're asking corporations to do something that we don't do in our normal lives. If you go back to your neighborhood and your communities, we're still largely a segregated society.
Right.
The people that we interact with, the folks that we go to church with, the people that are in our social groups are still primarily divided racially. But we want people to come into the workplace and be able to bring their entire selves, their whole selves. And so it's a challenge. And so we want people to be able to have the support in order to do that authentically and well.
Yeah. Well, we're right on the verge. I mean, this is Thanksgiving, and thank you for spending your Thanksgiving with us, by the way. And just want to tell you, so as we get ready to approach 2022, I know you've got your eyes set on the future. So talk to us about what we can expect coming from New York Urban League coming out of in 2022.
We are excited about having a year of reunion. So today, many of you all, as you were eating your turkey and celebrating your Thanksgiving, it may have been the first time you're able to gather with your family since COVID. And so we look forward to 2022 as hopefully we're coming out of COVID. More and more of us are vaccinated. We feel comfortable about doing that. And we look forward to having a year of reunion, bringing together those urban leaguers who've been involved in the Urban League in the 60s and the 70s and the 50s, as well as all the way through till today, celebrating them in various ways, both through our diversity inclusion lab, our small business solution center, our regular educational programming, as well as our employment programming. But bringing people together is going to be the theme of 2022 for the New York Urban League.
Yeah, bringing people together is a great thing. And obviously, you're doing that through the Diversity and Inclusion Lab. You're doing that by providing resources. But talk to us about COVID, because we talked about this before, and the challenges an organization has faced. What's it been like for you? And give us an update as to how you're managing and how you're dealing coming out of this COVID. And I want to say coming out of this COVID pandemic.
Coming out is what we hope we're doing, right? It has been a long road. I believe I was on the show before and I talked about when we first heard about COVID and Governor Cuomo sent us all home. I took one pen and one notepad thinking, this will blow over in a couple of weeks, right? Just couldn't believe that New Yorkers would be paralyzed for a longer period of time than, a week or two. And the reality is that we started giving out cash grants to New Yorkers. We gave out food. We started to alternate coming back into the office because we knew that that's primarily the people that we serve were essential workers. And so if they were going to work, we needed to be able to meet them as well out in the workplace. And it's been challenging. The calls that we have been receiving most recently, and is what is of grave concern to me, is around housing issues. We have individuals who are afraid that the moratorium that's been set on paying their rent is going to expire, and so there's concerns about that, and there's concerns about people being able to find livable housing. The prices, the affordability of New York City is just such an issue right now. And then the other concern that I have around COVID is that there are still people who do not feel comfortable taking the vaccine. They have had a long history of interaction with the healthcare system that has made them doubtful, that has made them suspicious, that has made them not want to have the vaccine. And I understand that. I understand that individuals particularly individuals that look like you and I, have not been well served by the American healthcare system. This is a particular point in place where if we continue to only have the people of color be reluctant to take the vaccine, even though there's other people around that, but our fear is that we don't want COVID to become the Black people's disease. Right. Because we know how they treat sickle cell anemia. We know how they treat other Black diseases, and so we want to make sure that we are actively involved, challenging ourselves, having conversations to feel like whether we feel comfortable taking the vaccine, because we want to make sure that this isn't a disease that becomes only concentrated in the African American community.
Do you feel like the message is better getting out in terms of the hesitancy? Because so many times. We've heard the same thing. We've heard people, I don't want to take the vaccine the way that it came out. It was quick. It was done under the former presidential administration. A lot of skepticism. But since then, a lot of progress has been made. But in your comings and goings, are you finding that people are still skeptical, given the fact that we've gotten this far? And some people said, listen, I made it this far and I'm still unvaccinated. I can continue on this road.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a high level of hesitancy. There's still a number of people who have not taken the vaccine, and you can look at it one of the two ways, right? So they've gotten this far and they've been okay, but the rules around it are getting more and more strict, right? So you can't go to a restaurant, you can't go to an event. We weren't allowed to have people at our historically Black college fair, right? So we're telling people about education, wanting to give them scholarships, but they couldn't come by state law unless they had a vaccine, right? And so as those rules continue to be rolled out, people will need to make decisions about whether they want to stay working at the hospital and or if they're going to take the vaccine, right? And so as people have to make really tough decisions, we want to make sure that we're there to provide them the information that they need. The number and cases of people who have been adversely impacted by the vaccine hopefully will continue to, hopefully go down. And so people will be able to look at those numbers and look at it empirically and say, you know what, there's all these Black people who did take it, and we didn't grow another arm. We haven't gotten sick, we haven't had anything happen to us. So let's look at all the folks that have taken it, both shots and maybe even a booster, and hopefully we'll change people's minds.
Yeah, hopefully that'll be the answer, that people's minds can be changed. But from your perspective, when you look at where we are right now, from whence we came, you definitely can see a lot of progress, right?
Oh, I definitely can see progress. Definitely see progress in terms of both things that we've talked about, in terms of folks being able to take the vaccine. And part of it, I give a lot of credit to our leadership at the governor's level and also at the mayoral level. Clearly, I have critiques of both of them, but the fact is that they have said, we really want people to get vaccinated. We want to be able to have people jumpstart their lives, to be able to go to graduation, to be able to go to the birthday, go to the graduation. And so pushing for that, as well as jump starting our economy, let's be clear. So I think that they have made some bold leadership moves that we needed in order to be able to move forward.
Yeah, and we talk about leadership. Obviously, there will be a new leadership shift in New York City, as New York City will get a new mayor, Eric Adams. And I know that for yourself, an opportunity to see new leadership. I know you've been very vocal about wanting to see things happen and your disappointment with the way things have occurred. Are you optimistic with the Eric Adams administration that some things will be changing around?
I'm very optimistic about Eric Adams' administration. We are so thrilled to have our second African-American mayor in New York City. But as we know, it is more than just being the African-American mayor. We want to make sure that the inequities that are present in our city are something that he's addressing. And that when we talk about COVID recovery, that is a recovery that we all experience, and that it's not just for the haves, but also the have-nots are included in that. And as we reset our city and our country, that we have an opportunity to do things differently, as there is literally going to be an investment in New York City infrastructure, New York City education, New York City employment at a level that we have not seen in a generation. And so we want to make sure that that investment is smart, that it is forward thinking, and that it is focused on eradicating some of those inequities.
Arva, we got to leave it there, but I want to thank you for spending Thanksgiving with me and our audience as well. And thank you for the work that's going on at the New York Urban League. Of course, the Diversity and Inclusion Lab. People will have an opportunity to tap into that and be connected. So if people want to get connected before we go, how do they do that?
Sure. The New York Urban League is www.nyul.org. And then if you want to look at specifically at the portal, it is NYUL Connect.
All right. Arva Rice, thank you so much. And again, happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you so much. All
righty. Taking a quick break. We do have some more show left. Another interesting guest. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on the Social Justice Forums. And welcome back. Cabrini Immigrant Services of New York is also a multi-service agency whose mission is to empower, provide legal supportive, as well as educational services to the immigrant, refugees, and other communities at NYC through access to essential services, civic participation, as well as community building. They strive together to work to build the immigrant community to create a more inclusive society by fostering justice, dignity, as well as respect. Joining me now and sharing more is the Executive Director of Cabrini Immigrant Services of NYC Incorporated, Javier Ramirez Daren, and we thank you so much for being with us, Javier.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to me to be here. It's important for us to be in
Yeah.
the communication community.
And I gotta wish you a happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for being with us too on a Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, the same to you and everybody who is watching this show.
Yes. So for somebody who may not be so familiar, we talk about Cabrini Immigrant Services, and of course, we know that you work in the immigrant community, but I gave a little bit of an intro, but for somebody who may not know, give us a more expanded look at the work that you guys do.
Sure. Well, we are located in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and we are like a welcoming center for immigrants, and we consider the immigrants newcomers is the majority of the population that we work. And newcomers could be anybody who just arrived or anybody who has been here for 20 years, but they don't know the right, they don't know the access, or they have difficulty in obtaining services that they needed. And as you mentioned that, our main goal, our mission is that all the immigrants, undocumented or documented, get access to the services that they need and get access to the education that will helping us to navigate not only the social services, but the legal services, especially with immigration. It's important. Immigration universe is huge, but we focus here in family petitions. And when you want to reunify with your family, or when you want to renew your green card, or you want to become a citizen, that is really important for us, or for the undocumented to understand why they qualify or not qualify. That is really important because unfortunately, many people take advantage of the documented immigrants because they are in need desperately for many years. And the immigration law, as I said before, is very complex. And sometimes they go to the grown person and their future basically is destroyed with immigration. So we're trying to provide those services. We, as I said before, we are located in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. We are a nonprofit organization, and we follow the example of Mother Savior Cabrini. She is the patron saint of immigrants for the Catholic world, and many people don't know who is Mother Cabrini. Well, Mother Cabrini was an Italian immigrant who arrived in the country in 1890. And she came to work with Italian immigrants at that time, 50,000 more or less, desperate for all the services facing the same situation many immigrants facing today. And she was able to provide orphanage schools, orphanage school, hospitals, and eventually she became the first US citizen, and it was an immigrant. That is great. So the patron saint of immigrant for the Catholic world, we feel kind of touched by her example. It was a woman that was struggling all her life here in the United States. She never mastered the English language, maybe many of us, but she was able to succeed and had a fingerprint that we're trying to continue to carry on with immigrants today all over the world. Initially, we're working in the Lower East Side, as I said before, but the needs for the immigrants in our city is huge. So we're seeing people all over the city and beyond, and people come to our doors and we're working with them, we're welcoming them, and our idea is to work together. So maybe for many of them, it's like a home, a safe place, because they feel like we treat it and we understand the reality. Majority of the staff is also immigrants. So that helping us in the process.
Well, let's stay and talk about immigration for a minute, because that's pretty huge. And I know that many people were on a backlog already before COVID actually hit, when it came to green cards, when it came to naturalization. Give me a little bit more insight and let me know, what's it like now, given the fact that we're, still in COVID, and you've got people still seeking immigration status, or we're on the verge of having their, their naturalization and all the things that were supposed to happen. What are you seeing come through your doors now?
Well, the situation is dramatic. I mean, before the pandemic was really bad, especially under Mr. Trump administration was horrible. I mean, the waiting list for obtaining papers was terrible. And with the pandemic, the situation get worse. I mean, in general, we consider that the immigration system is broken, and I want to try to explain you why very quickly. Let's say that I am a US citizen, and I want to petition my brother that is basically maybe 1 year younger than me. Unfortunately, he is now over 21. So in fact, the whole process for my brother to reunify with me, it will take more than 10 years. So now depending on the country. You are from Mexico, that process would take 25 years, 30 years. So it's very unfair, especially considering that we are a nation of immigrants. So if you before wanna become a citizen, usually that process before Trump, usually it takes more or less 8 months to maximum 8 months. Right now, it could take a year and a half, 2 years that you could become for an interview. And that is a huge, because when you become a US citizen, it's a huge change in your life. Just to put it clear, let's say that I am a legal permanent resident. Right now, I cannot petition my parents. Maybe parents get behind for many years, decades. And the only way to try to reunify our family in the United States, that is a safe place for the majority of the immigrants, is impossible. So waiting for many years, the process to become resident, to finally be a US citizen is long. As I said before, it could take decades. Now you have to wait 1 year and a half or 2 years to be just calling for the interview. So it's crazy. Plus the people who have been coming to the border and go to the court because they are facing deportation, the backlog is 2 or 3 years. And when you are there, you are in limbo. Because if your case is there, not necessarily mean that you will obtain kind of employment authorization or benefit. Basically, the government say, okay, I heard you and you are here. We had a case with you, but I cannot see you in 2 years. What happened with your life? Well, you have to start navigating the city and see what you can do. So that is more or less an example of what is happening. Plus the embassy for the people who are going to interviews overseas in the family reunification process. Some embassies, they had a backlog for 2 or 3 years, that the families complete all the papers. Many people from the Caribbean, for Dominican Republic, for any country, and they basically waited in limbo. So the situation is really bad. It's sad because we have to face it every day with our clients. Our clients anger and desperate. Sometimes they get frustrated with us, and we understand. They see us as, okay, you help me with this, help me. Why we cannot finish, and we say, unfortunately, it's beyond our hands. But our goal is also to explaining what is happening and what we can do in order to try to change that reality. That is more or less what we're doing with Justice for Immigrants.
Yeah. Share with us, as we now are on Thanksgiving, I know there's a lot of work that's going on with your organization in terms of preparing for the holiday and getting food out to families. What's it been like? And talk about some of the efforts that you guys have had leading up to Thanksgiving and making sure that you're trying to help in the area of food insecurity, which is affecting a lot of New Yorkers, and more particularly, I know, the immigrant community.
Well, we have been, I mean, the sister, how I call for the, we are a Catholic organization, and our main sponsor are the Missionary Sisters of Sacred Heart of Jesus, that many people know them as the Cabrini sisters. They always see our intervention like a whole intervention. No, we're trying to be, okay, you are a newcomer in the city, we have to address, you usually coming for legal services, yes, but we know you have social services that need to be addressed. Also, and one, as you mentioned, that Daren, is food insecurity, especially for the undocumented workers with those no protection. So it's difficult for them to bring a decent food to the tables, even for the workers that are citizens that live in our neighborhoods. So during the pandemic, we faced that. It was the amount of food that we distribute was almost the double. Usually we distribute 1,000 package of nutritious food. During the pandemic was 2,000. Right now, our average is more or less 1,200 packages. And we're preparing because we know the families struggle to bring the food and they want to celebrate. Celebration is also part of the melting pot of this country, learning about, for many of us to learn about this holiday that we don't have it in our countries. And it's a holiday that celebrates human beings and celebrate encounter and solidarity. So we're trying to talk about that with the people, understanding the importance of Thanksgiving for the American society, the culture that we embrace, but we know that they can afford that. So we were kind of lucky that we had many funders that are helping us, and they trust us because we have been with the food pantry since 2004. And as I said before, we distribute food for more than 1,000 families in the neighborhood and beyond, because we know that people coming from the Bronx, from Brooklyn, for all over the city just to have a decent package of food. Unfortunately, there are many food banks and food pantries in the city, but unfortunately, it's difficult to include in those packages nutritious and healthy food. Our commitment here is distribute vegetables, to distribute meat, milk that is good for them. So people coming all over because they know we had a good package, and it's thank for our donors and for the work that we do that. So we have been distributing only our regular package, but we were able to provide $20 gift certificates this month, so they could buy, because we know that everybody like to eat turkey. We have different cultures here, the Chinese community, the Latino community. So okay, maybe the best thing to get in order to celebrate the culture is this is some gift certificate. Hopefully you could buy wherever is good for you, for your family, to celebrate, stay together, and to celebrate that we are in this beautiful city, like New York City, for example.
It's a lot that's going on in terms of the holidays and really trying to meet the needs of people. And the closer that we get, to the end of the year, the more we get to see. And you look out in the community and you see the need still exists and how much greater it actually is. I know that in addition to taking care of the families for Thanksgiving, you also try to do something by way of the Angel Fund Scholarship. And that's something that's very special in your organization. What happens with the Angel Fund Scholarship?
Well, the Angel Fund is a program that we feel really proud because the Angel Fund, I coming from Colombia. I am a kind of privileged person there, but I am a working class guy. And the only way to overcome many of our economic difficulties is through education in order to have a better life for our family. And we know, especially when you are undocumented, how difficult it is to go and pay for the tuition in a college, even if it's a city college. It's expensive for us, especially if you are a working class family. So this program starts before many organizations start working with that around 2006, 2007. And the system all had that vision to see how we could help the community to improve, to integrate, to contribute to the economy. And we believe that education is the key. So we have, since then, that scholarship that is targeting for undocumented people. And the scholarship is only one part of the program. We're trying to help it with a small amount of money, sometimes $2,000, $3,000 per year, to help it to pay for tuition or costs related to education. But also it's a way to establish communication with the student and with the family. Many of them, they are totally lost with the educational system. I could use myself as an example. I got the privilege to have professional education and higher education in Colombia. And when I'm trying to navigate here to go for my master, and they asked me go to apply for FAFSA or those kind, I was totally lost. Nobody could support me. So just imagine our families working long shifts, 10 hours, 12 hours per day, and trying to support the kids to navigate the system is complicated. So it's not only the economic factor, but also helping the family to support the student and to navigate the different scenario that they're facing in education. So this is why we're doing today Angel Fund Scholarship.
Yeah, it's a wonderful work that you're actually doing to really help people, because it is a struggle. Education is a struggle, and not having the necessary resources. What are some of the challenges that you can share with us? Maybe that the immigrant population is facing that maybe we, the average person, may not be so aware of.
Well, there are many. I mean, one of the things is fear, especially the undocumented immigrants. They have fear. Even the city is a welcoming city. It's fear. I mean, it's fear when they want to access, for example, the domestic violence. They don't feel comfortable going to the police, or if you are a delivery person and you were assaulted, you don't want to go to the police. You feel afraid to call them because maybe they will ask you about your immigration status, or sometimes they living in a small apartment, small apartments to families, and they don't want to call the landlord for any repair because it's too many people there, but they're trying to survive. So it's fear, is injustice and inequality in the payment, is discrimination. But we're seeing that the legal part is the main barrier for them. And we're saying that is like we calculate that in the United States, more or less 11 million undocumented people, and means families that they are working, more or less 7 million of people are in the labor force, but they don't get access to any documentation. So they continue in fear. So the only way to bring solutions to those families is to change the law or to have some cap or path to obtain the documents. And also there are more fears. Many of my clients say, we feel invisible. We're working here all the time. And we see them in many fields, in the restaurants, they helping in our houses. I remember a couple of weeks I was working with a woman, maybe in the 60s, and she said, Javier, I have been working with this wonderful family for 25 years, but they never really asked me about my immigration status. They don't know, and they're kind with me, but they don't know how I face it, how difficult for me is to facing with the daily challenges that we have as a citizen. So they feel invisible. Sometimes they feel that people don't value enough all the contribution, and we see that in the pandemic. Here we see, I feel very proud, for example, I want to use Cabrini food pantry during the pandemic. We never closed. We never lost one single day. Even when everybody was so afraid to come, our volunteers were here, open the door, taking the precautions, but they feel that they are not valued enough. That the people say, yes, they are documented, but we need to do more. And I think it's important to the non-immigrant community understand the reality that we face it. Sometimes I know it's difficult. We had too many things in our place. So, let me learn about this. But sometimes people say, Javier, why they don't go to the Social Security and request a Social Security number? It's easy. Well, it's not easy like that. Maybe trying to learn more about the face, when they accusing us like we're stealing jobs, and we say, well, now it's a chore in the employees, and we are here to work, and it's clear that we are not stealing any job. But so it's a lot of myths that hopefully we could, and this is our role for agency too, to working with the non-immigrant community to learn about our realities, to learn that we are not the bad people that they call the previous administration, or the bad hombres, or those kind of crazy idea that they had in their mind, and prove that, hey, we're working, we pay taxes every single day. When we buy a soda, when we buy any product, we pay taxes. We contribute to the economy. So unfortunately, that is not visible for many people. I mean, in New York City, maybe it's different. Many people have the sensitivity to appreciate that, but unfortunately, it's a lot of things we have to do. And this is an affecting, unfortunately, the political arena at the federal level. Those kind of misunderstanding about the immigrants and the contributions.
Yeah, Javier, a lot there, and I want you to make sure that you stay connected to us, because we want to bring you back to the show so that we can continue to talk more about the work that you're doing, and how we can be more in tune with the challenges and the plight of our immigrant community that's so rich here in New York City. Thank you so much for being with us here, my brother, and again, happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thank you so much, and for the immigrant community or non-immigrant community, you need so many these services, someone that need orientation. Hey, we are here. Just give us a call, and we are here to work with the community. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, glad to have you. As our viewers know, they saw the information on the screen throughout the course of the interview. And of course, get connected with the Cabrini Immigrant Services. And I promise you, you can find out some helpful resources that might be able to assist you, especially as we get closer to the end of the year and the holidays and the needs that are out there. I want to thank you so much for being with us, Javier. And again, great having you with us.
Thank you, Daren. Have a wonderful day and happy holidays.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving. Well, listen, I want to take the time out on this Social Justice Forums to wish all of you a happy Thanksgiving. We thank you for joining us, and want to let you know that next week we're coming back with another episode of the Social Justice Forums, where we aim to elevate the conversation. And as always, we promote civic engagement and bring you some much needed conversation and dialogue about the issues at hand from the people who have got boots on the ground. And many times it's grassroots organizations. And that's what we love, to be able to bring grassroots organizations with boots on the ground to give you a perspective, to help you to understand what's happening by way of social justice as we take a look at the inequities that so many people face. Listen, from our producer, Latricia, and myself, we want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving. And be sure to join us next week here on the Social Justice Forums. I'm Daren Jaime saying take care. God bless.